Welcome to the Awe and Wonder AAC podcast. This is from the Special Education Technology Center, and we are so excited about our special guest today, Buti. We'll hear from her right away, but I'll just start by saying that I'm Sarah Kinsella.
And I'm Brenda Del Monte. So Mo, why don't you introduce yourself to the few people who may not know you?
Thanks. I'm Buti. I live in Chicago, Illinois. I've been in the field of disabilities for over 32 years. I was a special ed teacher, a special ed administrator, director of autism and intellectual disabilities in the third largest school district in the nation, and decided one day, 7 years ago, actually like last week, that I could help more people outside than I could in. And I just decided to take that leap of faith and start my own advocacy and consulting and presenting company. So now I'm a business owner, and I get to wear all kinds of different hats every single day, and it's amazing. It's the best thing I ever did.
Oh, wow. That's a big shift. That must have been taking some bravery on your
Yeah,
part.
it was scary. I'll tell you at the beginning. I actually had to say, okay, now what? Now what do I do? But it was super fun, and it's literally, I think the best thing is wearing a different hat every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like because I have my director of special ed certificate in the state of Illinois, a lot of school districts will call because maybe they don't have one for the moment and they need an interim, or their district is so small that they need someone just one day a week. And I'm like, oh, I could do that. So right now I'm a director in 2 different school districts, one day a week.
Oh,
And
wow.
and then I'm a presenter, and then I do tons of advocacy all over, not just Illinois. I could do it in any state because federal law is federal law, but then I do have to do some investigating about their state policies and laws, but I find that fun.
Wow. And you
Yeah.
sleep at some point?
Um, that is a good point. I probably do not sleep as much as I should. I have not learned the word no yet. I'm always like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's so fun. Every experience is so different. And I'll say never burn a bridge because our field is so small. I'll get old bosses of mine who are now in other districts saying, Mo, I need you to come out and observe this autism classroom and give us suggestions. And it was so fun. I got to do it last week in like 4 different classrooms. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how fun was this? And
That's
again,
neat.
a totally different hat. And so yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
That that's a good tip. Don't burn those bridges anyway, but you're right
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
never know what
You know,
opportunities will be there.
right.
So
Yeah.
Mo, I know you from seeing you at Closing the Gap last October. I was sitting there with Brenda, and Brenda was saying, "See, isn't she great? Isn't she
Oh.
great?" We were listening to you with all these tips for students with autism, and then also from your Dan and Mo classes from before. Will you tell us a little bit about those and what you're doing with presenting? And
Yeah, so presenting, I kind of have I started doing just autism, and then I really started expanding because of what I've learned, and then what I get to kind of see implemented in all the schools I go observe, and because I'm always observing students, so I get to make suggestions too at IEP meetings. So then I get to see them implemented. So then I really started getting into the technology, and then Dan, of course, taught me a ton of really cool stuff too. And I've always from the very, very early beginning of teaching, had students that were pretty significantly impaired and required alternate means of communication. So I was always super interested in that. And I wish I could rewind the clock because there's so much more I wanted to do or could have done
mm-hmm,
about just everything we know now.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, so presenting then is typically like autism, kind of some behavioral support, some really fun techie things, and that kind of AAC, augmentative communication. Those are kind of my buckets, and then IEP compliance. But I'm the big IEP nerd. I could talk about IEPs all day.
Well, that's good because some of us don't want to, so we need someone who knows. Who knows?
Right? Yes, yes.
That's good. So speaking of students, what can you think about in your career, you said what, 32 years?
Yeah, I started when
That's,
I was like two,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
you
you're
were
a
just a
baby. You're a
baby.
baby.
just a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a particular student in your career who's inspired you, or maybe a couple students?
Well,
Or
it's interesting you asked that because when I was saying about like way back when I was teaching, how there were students that most of them were significantly impaired. I say all my students inspired me in some way, right? I pulled something I learned from them.
Mhm.
But if I go back to my first classroom in Arizona, I think of this student, Nikki, who was labeled as like severely intellectually impaired. He was nonverbal. I think they called him cortically blind, physically handicapped. He had like the alphabet soup of labels. And he was probably my most significantly impaired child in class. And I knew he was in there, but I just didn't know how to reach him.
Mm.
So I asked, I remember I had just gone to a Caroline Musselwhite conference, first time I ever saw her, and I was like, I ate lunch with her, and I was like, oh my God, I was so starstruck. And I
Uh-huh.
came back and I asked for a AAC eval, and the speech therapist said he is not a candidate. And I'm like,
Mm.
why not? Right? I know,
Yeah.
Brenda, I see that exactly. But back then, I was like, okay, I'm the teacher. You're the okay.
Sadly,
So
not just back then, Mo. Sadly, not
yeah,
just back then.
yes. So there was very little, like he had very little body movement that he did on his own, that he could
Mhm.
control. Maybe his head a little, his mouth, his eyes. Um, so, and there was only a few things we really, really knew about him. We really knew he loved vanilla pudding. We really knew he hated chocolate pudding. We knew
Mm.
he loved to be loved, like he loved like a hug or
Mhm.
just attention. We knew he loved his grandma, and we knew he hated being repositioned. That's
Mm.
pretty much all we knew about him,
Mhm.
Mhm.
um, because he had no way to show what he knew. So
Mhm.
one day I was just, I don't even know what made me think of this. I put a headband on him, like one of those old school workout, like terry
Mhm.
cloth
Yeah.
ones, and taped.
Richard Simmons.
Yes, poor little Nikki, and taped an infrared light
Yeah.
here
Uh-huh.
and lowered the lights. And I had the chocolate and vanilla pudding, and I was just talking to him about like how he can tell me, even though I already know you like vanilla, but is there some way you can tell me? So we talked it through, and I first did, of course, just so he'd always pick vanilla. So I would put like chocolate way out of the reach, and I we were eating together, and then I put the chocolate in, and the first one he picks is vanilla. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So we're talking, and then he's eating. Then the next one, he has the light on the chocolate. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then he was pissed at me. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
so sorry you picked the chocolate. I was shocked how quickly he learned not to look at the chocolate. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is day one, and he's
Wow.
not
Mhm.
a candidate for AAC. So
Mhm.
then I'm setting up the next activity. This is hilarious. I had an 18-year-old assistant, Julie, beautiful. And this kid's in middle school. So next thing you know, I see the infrared light on her behind.
Oh my
And
God.
I say, "Hey Julie, can you walk over to my desk?" She's like, okay. She walks over there and I go, can you climb on my desk? She goes, what? I go, just do it. And she does. And there's the light. And then I go, now come over to this side of the room. And then I
Oh
go,
my goodness.
Nikki, you're in there. Yes.
Oh, look at
And
that
then,
range of motion.
right, I was like, so I was like, now I'm like, he is truly in there.
Hmm.
And I went back and asked again for the assessment and was told again no. So then I made that plexiglass frame, put pictures on both sides, had it on his wheelchair tray, and literally engaged him in every academic task. And I was shocked how much I'm like, oh yeah, he knows what month it is, you guys. I'm like, Nikki,
Mm.
you know so much. Like, and then we brought his grandma in to show him, and she was crying. And I'm like,
Oh,
okay, yeah. So we put a an I love grandma on it, and then of course he looked at it. She's like crying. Do you really think he? And I'm like, he loves you. You're his
yeah.
mama. So
Mhm.
So sweet.
it was, and that was like early. That was my first classroom in Arizona, and I always wonder, like, oh, what could that have been if he had a robust system, right? So I just use that. But he was able to engage and he was able to really show what he knows. So that always inspired me moving forward to be like all students have the ability to communicate, and
Right.
it's really like our job to figure it out. And yeah, it was he just inspired me to say, wow, if Nikki can communicate, anybody can communicate.
Right.
And
Right. And you
and
saw
he
that
showed his
potential.
age, and he has age appropriate, stared at my beautiful assistant. Very age appropriate. I was like, okay.
No
But I
kidding.
mean, that I wish that didn't happen anymore. I just did an eval yesterday and with a student with Down syndrome, and he is 6, and they said, yeah, he's 6, and they said, we've been told so far that he isn't ready. And I'm thinking, how do you get ready?
Yeah.
If you never exposed to it, if you never have it to practice on, how do you get ready?
Yeah.
And what are you, and that goes back to some of those phrases we use now, right? Nobody's too anything for, literacy. Nobody's too disabled for AAC. Nobody, right? Those kind of statements. Cause it's like,
Yeah.
wait, what?
Yeah.
And I mean, like you, I work with those with significant physical disabilities. So this boy with Down syndrome comes up and points at a picture. I'm like, what more do you want? Like,
You're like, ding, 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 we have a winner.
yeah,
Yeah.
what prerequisites were somebody else operating off of? Because I mean, this is a slam dunk.
Well, right. You know, it's so funny. When I was telling you, my old boss brought me in to observe these autism classrooms. Then she brought the whole team together, and I've brought my bag of tricks, and I say, well, first of all, I saw not one visual, and there's so many kids with autism, so many children nonverbal. And then they're like, oh, well, we have some. And the speech therapist opens up a book, a binder. And I was like, oh, I didn't see that in any classes. I didn't see that referenced. I didn't see it out. I didn't see it used. So then I show them the big like core board, and I show them like how to use it. And then I feel so bad. But the speech therapist says, oh, no, they don't have the prerequisites. They don't have attention. And I go, wrong answer. And then I was like, sorry. I was like, no. And then I just stood up and did this whole like defunking of the myths. I said, they don't have the motor skills, figure out a different way to access it. They don't have, I just kept going through all the myths. And then I go, okay, sorry. And there you have it. And I just sat down, and then the speech therapist sat down, and I was like, so let's get back to some more ideas. And, a few of the teachers were so excited. They were like, where do I get that board? And I'm like, you're excited? It's yours. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, you're excited? Here's yours. And I started demonstrating it and talking about it, and showed them like Chris Bouguet's aided language simulation video. I go, I know it's a cartoon, but this will give you the philosophy. And then they're going to have me come in. I got them lesson picks, licenses. And then I'm going to come in a few weeks to see how it's going. And they want me to actually like work with children. Always the challenge with that is then they assume they're going to see the magic, meaning it's going to work. It doesn't work overnight, right? It's something you have to, but I'm more than happy to do it. I just don't want them to see like, see, even Mo couldn't get them to whatever, but you can't, how many times you have to model that word before it can just like speaking. So I'm hoping, I think these 2 teachers, the 2 out of the 4, I think they will be doing it. I'm not sure.
Sounds like they're excited.
Yeah. And then I gave it to them, they're like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing, leaving it in the classroom. We actually heard someone else mention that on a podcast, that, that leaving something, I think, was that Jane Farrell? She was saying leaving something, or Caroline, in the classroom. I think
it might have been Cassie.
Oh, Cassie. Okay.
But I don't know.
Leaving something that kind of reminds them, but also like in the world of education, we're not like showered with all sorts of free things and wonderful prizes.
Right. So Mo's all like, you get a core board, you get a core board.
Yeah.
But I love that. You know what you're doing? Exciting. You're doing one of those guiding principles that will come up in a minute, I'm sure. But it's like, focus on the people who are ready to learn. Focus on the people who are ready to do it. Like that's
a great point.
You want it here, you get the core board. You already know that you've got a couple that are not sure yet. Yeah. And you've got 2 that are ready to jump in. And you're not even bothered by the speech therapist at this point. You're just going to focus on the people who are ready to move forward with it. And I think that if we leave going, oh man, 50% of them don't even get it, we're defeated.
Yeah.
If we go, hey, I got 2 teachers. I mean, that's going to make an impact on all those kids. It's just kind of like half full, half empty perspective there.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I'm super excited to go back to see, and we even started a Google Doc, so we can put in different ideas and links, and so I'm trying to give them as many resources before I get there as possible to go back in
idea.
and yeah.
Great idea.
And then they can ask questions on it too. Like it's just a Google Doc, but yeah. So
do you find that you because your background is teaching, that teachers respect what you have a lot to say?
That is such an interesting, now that you say that, this would not be the first speech therapist who didn't want my advice. But teacher, that is, and you know what, if we think about it too, speech is a related service. So it's helping them access their special ed services. So they're only a snapshot in the child's day, and the teacher's the one that's implementing. So I think that has to do with it too, is that the teacher's like, oh God, please help me do this because I have to do it all day. Like, how do I do it? But yeah, that could be a really, because my background is teaching, definitely. But I've just always had this passion, not just because of Nikki, but I've had so many children. There's this other student, the story's not as long, from Arizona, Sabari, and I got to see him when I went back to ASTAP as an adult. His mother brought him to me.
Oh, neat.
He has very few words, and he would be able to say mo because I also babysat for him. And he would say salsa because I had these assistants that would always eat jalapenos and hot stuff. And well, long story short, I saw him all those years later as a 20-something-year-old, and he remembered salsa, Miss Mo, and more because
oh my gosh,
that was my first. He loved the swing, and he would hate it when he would stop. And I would first we just did the sign for more, and then he had to say more, but then like more sounded like Mo, Miss Mo. But anyways, so he actually said those 3 things, and his mom was like, oh my gosh, like he remembers you.
So meaningful. Yeah. That's so sweet.
It's so important though. I think the other point you're making is like that, making that human connection with the student and making it personal is what sticks.
Oh yeah. I mean, here's a kid with autism, intellectual disability, and 15 years later, whatever many years later, he's like, oh, Miss Mo's salsa and more. That I learned that from her.
Yeah. Well, you're in it for the kids, and as much as it's hard when someone says no, or they're not this yet, or this, and we can get kind of caught up on that and how that's unfair and not right. But on the other hand, you're showing us, well, I'm not stuck in my silo. I know communication too. I know this kid deserves a way to communicate.
A way to tell us what he knows. Yeah.
So that's kind of a guiding principle, I think, that doesn't change depending on, from your beginning of your career to now to 20 years from now.
Yeah.
What else would you say are some guiding principles that
always have high expectations and presume competence? I can't tell you how many IEP meetings I go to where I'm having to say this to the teachers, where they do the opposite, and they lowball the child, and and everything is so, and they're like, well, we can always revise the IEP and write, if they master these goals. I'm like, it's not just about where you're setting the goals. It's about your literal mindset when you're working with the child. If you don't set the bar high for them, if you don't expect them to understand or know or comprehend, they're not going to meet you. And I'm like, unless you have evidence to prove otherwise, and you're using robust systems and communication and evidence-based strategies, that's a different story. But when you're just presuming they don't know because they don't show it, it's so, that is probably one of the hardest things to get teachers to believe in my eyes so far, is especially those who don't have a really good communication system. Even some who are verbal like this mom, bless her heart, she's so great. She has to videotape him doing every goal that's in his IEP at home because they send the IEP report card and they always say 0, like he can't do it, 0, 0, 0.
Mm,
She's like, what do you mean he can't count to 10? He counts to 100, and she'll videotape and send it in. And I mean, yes, there is something to be said about doing things in multiple environments. Totally understand that
mhm.
generalization. But I think that their expectations are so low that he just isn't performing at school. Whereas
Right.
the mom is like, my son's a genius
Right.
and I'll show you. So I think for her, he performs. At
Mhm.
school, he doesn't. And he even has some interesting behaviors and
Mhm.
um it just breaks my heart because if you just raise that bar, if you just, presume competence,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
will see a
Mhm.
difference in how your children perform. I truly believe that.
Mhm.
And
So, Mo,
oh, go ahead.
well, well,
I,
in your role, then, how do you, what's worked when working with teams when that's the message you're trying to get across?
um, that's a great question. I mean, I do my little soapbox dance and song. I do really just beg them to. Sometimes I tell them a story about a kiddo I had, like a
Mm,
Nikki.
uh-huh.
Um, and there's a ton of other ones. If they don't want the Nikki story, I got another one because there are all these kids that I have seen that have gone through many years of having a teacher and nobody assumed they could do anything. And then I
Mhm.
got them and I was like, what can we do that's more or different? Like more or different is my favorite phrase to tell the school. If that
Love that.
didn't work, more or different. What can you do more or different? They're not meeting their goals. Stop, put on your brakes, reconvene the team. What can we do more or different? And it's we, meaning us educators. So I'm always like, everyone can understand, but it's all children have the ability to understand, to communicate, but it's our job as the educators, the therapists, the related service providers, even the parents to think outside the box and be creative of like, how do we help the child show what they know?
Right.
And and it doesn't just mean communication as in like verbal or AAC, but even, written expression. There's so much AT out there. You can't tell me because he's, doesn't like fine motor tasks that he is not allowed to engage in writing tasks. Like there's
Right.
AT everywhere. Like it's
Right.
there's it's
We just
so
haven't
I
found the way for him,
yeah. So like
and that's up to
stop.
us.
Yep, stop your brakes. What can we do more different? And
I
it
love
doesn't
that.
matter how many times you have to stop your brakes. I say the more different is my favorite phrase at a meeting because if they'll say, well, that hasn't been working, and so we're going to do a different goal. And then I'm like, well, let's go back to that goal. Why isn't that working? What can we do more different with that? Because we obviously thought it was an important goal. What can we do more different? And yeah, like and what AT could we pull in or what different type of environment or different strategies and stuff like that. So yeah.
And sometimes more indifferent looks like, let's stop doing drill and let's make this personal. Let's make this relatable for him so it matters to count to 10.
Right.
Let's play hide and seek and his friends hide while he counts to 10. Like let's make counting to 10 matter if that's
Mhm.
really the goal we're going to do.
Yep.
Oh,
Hmm.
and if you already have a video of him counting to 100, what's after counting? Because he's not doing it for you because he's been asked to count for 5 years. So it's like, let's make this matter to him. I think more or different. Sometimes people think more or different. I'm going to write the goal
Yep.
differently,
Right.
but it's the delivery,
Implementation. Yeah.
the
Hmm.
implementation and of getting a kid to the end game is what probably needs to change.
Yep. Yep. Definitely. I love that for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I am gonna ask. We have his IEP meeting next week. I'm gonna say, how about hide and seek? He's in kindergarten. Like, how about that?
There
Count
you
to
go.
10, because he is a silly little boy. He would probably think that was hilarious, like covering his
Yeah.
eyes and maybe the
Right.
teacher hides or yeah, I love it.
And then
Well,
all his friends are getting impatient because he's not counting. And now there's like the social pressure to just play the game, right?
Right.
He's not
Yeah.
performing
yeah.
for a teacher who doesn't believe in him. Every single kid hiding believes he can count to 10. That's why they ran off. It's like, let's
Yeah.
create those authentic experiences. And that's what needs to be more, different, better, frankly, right?
This reminds me of like a lot of, Brandon and I will do consultations with really great school teams, similar to like you do, Mo. They're great people. We're all in it for the same reason. But I think a lot of times a theme is kind of around what you're talking about, Mo, and kind of the teaching versus testing. And we get stuck in a lot of that testing in our roles in the schools, and we have IEP goals and we have other goals. Do you have anything that tips or tricks around that's worked
From
when
people that
it's
are
getting done?
testing IEP goals every day, but not actually
Oh,
teaching.
yeah.
And it's not
And
authentic.
trust me, even if they did it every day, I wouldn't mind, but they're not. They're doing it like once a quarter. And I'll say, so what instruction are you implementing? Because the IEP goal is just a data point. It's how they're responding to your instruction. So
Right.
I'll say that, and they're like, "Well, we're progress monitoring it with the whatever program." I'm like, "Yeah."
Mhm.
So how are you teaching it? And then this is great. This mom says, "No, the computer teaches them." And I'm like, "Oh, so they're literally putting him on, read 180 or whatever, and then
Right.
taking this." So I said, "But so." Take progress monitoring away. I don't know, like I think when MTSS and RTI and all that came in, that's when everyone started using that word. I wish it went back to saying goal data, IEP goal data, because back in the day you had your little goal sheet.
Hmm.
You had your little clicker, you had your little tricks and slash marks and whatever, and you were actually then instructing your students to make educational gains. And now they're so into like what program is going to progress monitor this when it's like, no, you take the goal, you decide how am I going to provide instruction, and then the data I'm going to pull is how he responded to the instruction. But that connection is
Hmm.
often missed from
Hmm.
teachers. And I saw it starting to happen when the RTI and MTSS started because they were really pushing progress monitoring, and then it just kind of blurred into IEPs, and now everyone thinks you have to have like a particular tool to measure an IEP goal. So then I always bring up one that could never have a tool, right? Like something like a physical therapy goal or something. I go, so what do? They create an IEP goal sheet, like,
Hmm.
so I try to demonstrate it by using something you can kind of visualize to say, like, there is no computer program that's going to measure his ability to, go up and down the stairs with oh boy, I'm not getting my physical
Right.
therapy terms in, but
Yeah.
There shouldn't be any computer that's going to measure authentic communication. I
I
mean,
know,
right?
I
You
know,
have to
I
create
know.
those experiences.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it would be interesting if a speech path is like, oh, we're pulling the data from how often they use it. You know how some
Right.
devices will, and I'm like, oh, if they said that, I'd be like, no.
Hmm.
That because first of all, you don't know who's pushing the button if you're doing true
Right.
aided language stimulation.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so but yeah, it's the IEPs are I would like to retrain everyone.
So, we ran across this with one other person too, where it's like, so you're walking in, and if you're there, then probably somebody's not doing their job well.
Yeah.
Somebody along the way. And so you're walking into people, adult learners or potential learners. We're going to assume potential for
Yeah.
learning for the adults as well. But that creates defensiveness.
Yeah.
So what is your approach to kind of go, I'm here to help you. Like, I'm not here to break you down. I literally am here to help you do this better, different.
Yeah, I think what helped me initially was most of my cases were in Chicago public schools. So we'd get on the Zoom or get in person. I'd be like, hey guys, like my friends, I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, hey, oh, well, yeah, I'll see you next weekend. Okay, cool. So at first that was initially kind of what helped me do the role, but now it's blown up
Mm-hmm.
and plus a lot of my friends have left those roles. I'm like, no, but
Hmm.
so what I try to do is in the state of Illinois, we have to the schools are required to give a draft 3 days in advance with no minutes or LRE information, but a draft of the present levels and things like that, the goals.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to review it ahead of time and give them kind of feedback beforehand so they have an opportunity to digest it on their own without me kind of. Some schools love that because they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, thanks so much for that input, Mo. That was super helpful. We've actually made some tweaks. We're going to put it up on the screen. So that helps because then they also, I hope that they realize that why I'm doing it that way and not in the middle of the meeting. Like,
Right.
Right.
and then I try to say, like, let's talk this out. And then whenever we do talk it out and it's successful, I say, that was a great collaboration. That I really like that. That worked well.
Mm-hmm.
To try to reinforce them.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, then there's the third way where I'm just like the bulldog. Unfortunately, it gets to that. I always try first, I provide support beforehand. Then I try to be like, let's talk this out together. Let's think
Right.
about this. And then the third way is finally like, all right, well, sorry, it's not measurable. It's just not measurable. And
Right.
then or I'll say like, okay, act it out. I would like you to take that goal and act it out. If you cannot, it is not measurable. You want to
Mm.
show, if you cannot show me, she's like, well, I understand what it means. I'm like, but that's not the point.
Right.
So,
Right.
so unfortunately, the third way is I'm a little bit of a bulldog. Um,
Well, it's kind of like your myth debunking game
yeah,
show, right? But
yeah,
you're playful in it. But sometimes we just kind of need to hear that, and
yeah.
that some things aren't black and white or aren't gray, right? It's like, no, that really isn't
It
true.
really is not true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that it's virtual now because I'm like Google searching up a storm for like case law or the law or the actual, our State Board of Ed's website. I'm like, oh, I dropped the link just to help you guys. It's the transition plan guidance from the state. It's
Hmm.
really helpful.
Just happen to
Might
have
want
it
to check,
here.
might want to check that out. Yeah. So I mean, uh yeah, I mean, like one of the districts I'm working with right now, um, they're like, oh, we put the minutes on the draft. That's not predetermination. And I said, oh, actually, it is. Predetermination is not just the label eligibility, it's also services and LRE, and minutes, LRE, all that. And then she's like, how was I supposed to do that? And she got really defensive with me.
Mm.
And I said, well, now, like, and then she's like, well, in the future, I need a email of when all the laws change. I'm like, yeah, predetermination never changed, but oh, no problem. I'm like, oh my goodness, she got so defensive. And I've been in the field for 10 years. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically you're saying you can't win them all, but you do kind of start with the kill 'em with kindness side of things.
Yeah, and and
Yeah.
st- and that you're there to collaborate, and that you've
Partnership.
been in their shoes too. I think a lot of times, like, oh, when
Yeah.
I was a teacher, sometimes I like to let them know that because not all
Hmm.
advocates are. A lot of advocates, at least in the state of Illinois, I almost said just, and then I took that word out, are parents of children with
Hmm.
disabilities.
Yeah.
I also went to law classes within the last decade to learn special ed law like really well. And I've been in many due process cases and as the expert witness. So I try to get the law part great, but
Hmm.
then the whole instructional part, I have to remind them like I was a teacher and
Hmm.
I'm in classrooms and I see what can work and I see what
Hmm.
can't work.
Hmm.
Right.
And sometimes I don't even know the actual child. Like I've never met them, but I'm their
Hmm.
advocate.
Right.
But yeah, and sometimes I've met them and I'm like, no, I've actually seen them do this, or I know,
Hmm.
so
Yeah. Well, so you have an interesting background from being a teacher and kind of like being a communication specialist as well, right? And you're focused on autism and IEP. And it's just kind of now developing more, right,
yeah,
into new things that you're doing. I think 7 years is you're in it, but you probably still have so many things that you want to
yeah.
do within that. When you think about the end of your career eventually, in what areas do you hope you've made an impact?
I think most is teaching people how to be an advocate, whether you're a teacher, a therapist, administrator, or a parent. Always keep the child in the center.
Mm,
Always focus on the child. There's times we're in the middle of a Zoom and it's not going well. I will share screen a picture of the child and not say a
Oh,
word. And I'll just be like, okay, we're all back. Okay, good. Like advocacy
Mm,
has to always center around the child, and everybody is an advocate. Because if you're on a child's team, you should be an advocate, right? Um, so I think that like always just sharing that with like sharing that when they do introductions and they say, oh, and Mo's the advocate, and I'll say like we're all advocates, like just
hmm,
reminding them that like really all of our roles are, if we're doing them right, are to advocate for the child,
right.
mhm.
right?
I love that idea of putting up the picture of the child just as a
Oh
I
yeah.
reminder.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I've
vital.
had parents bring a framed picture, put it in the middle of it if we're doing it in person. It
Oh,
just is it just is such a great reminder, especially in those meetings where there is something contentious, like something
Mhm,
did happen, a ball was
mhm,
dropped. I'm like, oh, can you please bring a picture of your child, like a really fun, happy one framed? And they're like, yeah, why? And I'm like, you'll see. So
mhm,
like we put
mhm.
it down. I'm like, just a friendly reminder, we're all here for this awesome kiddo. And it does somehow like just kind of calm everyone down and just kind of remind everyone that like we're not here to be adults winning. We're here to
hmm.
be cheerleaders for the child to win, right?
Right.
Love,
I've
yeah.
so you're talking about like oh what would I tell my younger self now, right? And what if you saw Nikki now and what other things
Mm,
would you try? But honestly, it's not like you had a high-tech eye gaze board back. I mean, eye gaze device back then. Like you
sure.
probably used what the technology you could use. But I mean, I don't know if it's if I'm wanting you to tell me like what do you wish you knew or what do you wish people knew coming out of the field now so that we can move it forward. So many times I think I want the 25-year SLP to know what I know so that the field moves forward and they don't have to be 50 before they know what I know or else we don't move forward. What do you think moves the field forward?
Well, it's funny because one of when you were saying like you're doing so many things in your field or in your job, and you probably have more that you want to do. And one of them is to teach college because I'm like, they're
Mhm.
not teaching them the right stuff.
Right.
Like
Right.
I truly believe that it starts from how we're preparing our SLPs, our SPED teachers, our general ed teachers,
Mhm.
Hmm.
and they're fresh out of college, and you're like, wait, what do you mean you've never written an IEP goal? Like, how is
Yeah.
this possible? Or what do you mean
Mhm.
you don't know what the word or what AAC means? Like,
Right.
I wish I could teach college, but I mean, I have so many different jobs. It can only be like
Mhm.
one class at a time, and I just
Mhm.
haven't found. I mean, I look on LinkedIn and stuff, but I just think they need someone that's going to really be like honest
Mhm.
and here's what it's really like and here are the strategies that you can do, because even just the fact that you're going to have maybe 8 kids in your class at all different levels, and maybe you're
Right.
going to have 8 kids in your class with 4 different devices and 2 different behavior plans, like
Mhm.
Right.
nobody told us that.
Right.
And
Mhm.
teachers walk in and they're like, why don't I have all first graders? I'm like, oh, well, legally,
Right.
you can have a 4-year age span. And within that
Mhm.
4-year age span, you might have 8 different levels. And
Mhm.
and they're just like shocked. They're
Right.
absolutely shocked. And I really wish we could prepare our young educators
Mhm.
better. And I know we have such a shortage, so they're pushing them out quicker. They're
Mhm.
fast tracking them. They're even giving certificates for like emergency
Emergency.
certificates.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So it's almost like, how are we
It,
ever going to fix that, right?
Mhm.
yeah. It makes me think about, like the emergency certificate, and there's so much that people have to learn within their program. And I love how you brought up gen ed teachers too, because I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's where a lot of this needs to happen as well. But it almost makes me think, gosh, if they had like a Mo Buti first year out of their program to like
Oh
mentor them, right? Or be there to ask questions,
Mhm.
like that would be kind of interesting. Like
yeah.
past you're past the program, now you're really in it. And now you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
what do I do?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because
I
the student
know.
teaching is like shorter as well. Some states have shortened that. And it yeah, they're just not prepared. And in some states like Illinois, we changed from having specific certificates of what your label of your degree was, which is the label of the disability in which you got a degree in. And now it's just an LBS 1, Learning Behavior Specialist 1 or 2, which
Okay.
basically just means a special ed teacher.
Mm.
And they had to do that in Illinois because of a Chicago Public School 22-year lawsuit called Corey H. And basically what was happening was like I was certified to teach severe, profound, and I had a master's in severe intellectual disabilities. Back then it was called like SPH or something, I don't remember,
Mhm.
and physical disabilities. But you could have like a total of like 3 disabilities in your classroom in the state or something, but you couldn't have all the labels, right?
Oh.
Right. So if I was certified in that and I got a child with a learning disability, I would say, oh, I already have 3 disabilities in my room or something. It was really
Huh.
weird. So it
Interesting.
it caused needing more teachers actually.
Right.
But the problem is we really back then, I mean, and then I got a master's in back then it was called BD, behavior disorder. Now it's called
Hmm.
ED. So like then we got our degrees in the label of the type of children you were teaching.
Right.
And now you get a class on it. No, not even a class, probably. You get like an overview of what everything is.
Mhm.
Right.
Whereas back then it was so much more specific to meet the needs of the
Mhm.
children you're serving. It's kind of
Mm.
mind-blowing to think now it's a generic special ed. I could get children that all need repositioning and communication devices. And I don't even know like what a Rifton is. I don't even know what a
Mhm.
bolster is. I don't know what a AAC is. And it- and they're the teacher because they have
Hmm.
the certificate and they might
Right.
have just had a class where they're like, oh, I think I wrote that word down somewhere, and
Hmm.
it's boy, I remember going into a classroom once and seeing a lot of like say it switches and pictures and positioning equipment. And I said, how long ago did you get your degree? And it was like right around when I did. I'm like,
Mhm.
was it in? And back then he's like, it was TMH. And I'm like, yes, because back then they taught us those
Mhm.
very specific things. Granted,
Right.
the world and technology has changed, but we still knew how to work the best we could with the type of students that we had in front of us. And
Mhm.
now that
That's
generic has really kind of
right.
ruined that.
It's
Mhm.
now it seems like this is a time to really pull in your people, right? Your
Hmm.
collaborators. It
Yes.
you need that PT so you can find out about the Riften and the things that you have that general knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if part of the challenge is just making time to
Yes.
have those conversations with people.
Well, and
Time. Go ahead.
I would also say though, I work with an OT who has a student, and she's getting her doctorate in OT and in some Indiana, and she observed us using switches and doing things, and she was like, "I never learned any of this," and she's about to get her doctorate in OT, and she did not learn switch access.
Mm.
And she's like, "If we did learn it, we learned it in a way I don't remember ever learning it."
Mm.
And which means it was a one day, it was a something that
A
was never
summary.
applied. So then it's like if special ed teachers are expected to be general special ed, if you know,
Right.
and then
It's what.
specialists are supposed to have all these pieces, they don't have it either. I mean,
Mm-mm.
if somebody coming out, but think about how broad OT is. Even in pediatrics, there's a ton of handwriting and all that kind of stuff, let
Right.
alone
And
all
feeding
the
and
activities
sensory and
all
yeah.
the
Or
activities of daily living from birth to death is OT. So switches are low incidence in that profession,
hmm
but that low incidence piece it then gets by the wayside. We only have so many hours in a day, so many
Yeah.
hours in the degree program. And then so I think you're right. I think some of it is could we as a field do a better job in mentorship or having a program where people can get mentored from others since they can't learn it
hmm
all.
Right.
There's no way to learn it all coming out.
And that's why I think some of these conferences are so great because that's really like in Arizona, I had a great PT and a great OT, and I learned so much from them, but I didn't have a strong speech department. So
Mm-hmm.
I learned all of the communication stuff, which is hilarious because now that's one of my strengths from all the conferences and books I
Mm-hmm.
read back then.
Right.
And then I got to try everything with my students,
Mm-hmm.
which was a nice thing too. But yeah, I think the ability, if I can tell any young educators, is building your network, like building your team, even
Mm-hmm.
if it's not the team in your current setting, meaning is there someone else in the district that
Mm-hmm.
you're working that might be really good at AAC or really good at positioning or really good, like can you or do you need to just pull in other people as well?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And never being afraid to ask for help and being open to learning because I mean I learn all the time from
Hmm.
things. I'm always like in a room going, "Ooh, can I take a picture of that?" You know, like
Hmm.
oh, I never thought of that. That's a great idea. Or
Hmm.
just the way someone, does something or the way they
Yeah.
write something in the IEP. So being open to learning and just really building your team because there's no way with the way schools are preparing our staff now that they are really truly prepared for the
Mm-hmm.
students that they serve.
Mm-hmm.
So just don't feel bad to ask for help, build your team of support, get to know who the experts are in what areas in your district so then you can call on them. And if you are one of those experts, answer the call.
Right. Right. Make yourself
Mm-hmm.
available. And
Yeah.
even in a more broad reach, people like you and other people who are, people that we look up to and think, oh my goodness, if only I could do it like this. Wouldn't it be neat if
Yeah.
I could pick her brain? Something that I've had
That's
to
what's great
learn.
about social media, right? Like we
Yes,
didn't have that back
exactly.
now. Now it's like, oh, back then I was so starstruck by Caroline Musselwhite from the book. I think wasn't it Engineering Your Classroom, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
when I went to that conference and I'm sitting in the front seat with this girl, Janice Pilling, who I didn't know, and we were just like, oh my God, we're writing everything down. And then we come up to ask a question, which now I know as a presenter, give them a break, right? But we come up to ask a question. She's like, I have to eat lunch. Come sit with me. And we're like,
Yeah.
and now, if I want to see like someone I'm like, about, I just say, oh, let me see if they're on Facebook. Like it's so
Yes.
great. Like
Mm-hmm.
I know Karen Erickson will know this answer. I'm going to reach out to her. I know. So it's actually so much easier now
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
to get support outside of your school network and build a team that way or get on some of these Facebook groups and learn from others. I just don't I say like don't get overwhelmed. Like the quiet listserv when I first joined it, I was like, oh my God, I got like 20
Oh,
emails today. I got to read them all. And then
yeah.
I was like, okay, no, now I'm overwhelmed. So then I made them all go automatically to a box. But then I was like, oh, now I never see them. So now I have them
Right.
back, but I'm like, I read like the subject line. So it's very important that you have a good subject line. Because some I'm like, okay, right now, today, I don't need to know that information. So I'm okay with letting it go.
Yeah.
So even the same thing with some of those Facebook groups you join, like there's thousands of people joining, right? So there could be posts all day, every day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can't
Hmm.
get yourself caught up in that. But what's great too about, for instance, Facebook groups is you can search the group for a key topic, right? You can see who posted about
Right.
that topic and say, oh, this was so helpful.
Right.
And they have the same kind of class as me and stuff. So there's really more out there to help support our young or newly certified
Hmm.
educators and therapists. They just really have to be not scared to jump in and use all the
That's
great
true.
resources that are out there.
That's true. And to
How,
think critically about them too,
Yeah.
and make sure you know what you're looking at and who that resource is.
Hmm.
right,
Yeah.
because with 1,000 posts is 1,000 opinions. Um,
Yes, that is true. That is true.
um, Tell me this, Mo. How are you balancing your life with your work?
Oh, did I say I was?
No, I
Um,
I mean, what are things that you think when you are doing that, right? That remember like 3 years ago on a Thursday when you're balanced everything? No, I'm
yeah.
just kidding.
Like,
But
wait,
when
listen.
when you feel balanced, what does that look like? Is that because you make time to work out? Is that because you make time to meet with friends? I know you have a lot of family in Chicago. Is that,
Yeah.
I mean, are you pretty intentional about doing non-work things to stay balanced?
No, I'm just being honest. I like Friday night, I get so excited because I'm like, ooh, Friday night, now I could just review a bunch of IEPs. And I'll literally like turn on the trash TV, bring
Well,
over the
that's balance,
computer. Yeah, but I'm like reviewing
but
IEPs.
yeah,
Like, go
yeah.
ahead, send me an IEP. Friday nights, that's me. And I just like reviewing IEPs all the time. Um, yeah, like just last night, there was a mom on Facebook who was emailing me, and I was like, "Oh, I have time tomorrow, right before I teach aerobics. Shoot me an email with your IEP, and I'll review it." And I could do it so quick because it's a Chicago public
Mhm.
school one, so I'm like, "Oh, I could do that in my sleep." I love when I'm at a meeting and I'll say, "Oh, section 13A," and they're like, "Oh, is that where that is?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's the third drop-down box over to the right. Click on this."
You've got
And they're
memories.
like, "Oh, thanks. Yeah." And then I still have a ton of friends that work there, so they always give me like all the updates to the system. So
But
I
you
know.
mentioned that you teach aerobics. So
I do that once a week
Yeah.
you are
for
doing it pretty.
28 years. And
Wow.
Oh,
yeah, and I
wow.
was always Sunday night. And I thought, oh my gosh, did working with people, my lovely friends with autism teach me to be rigid? Because one day my boss calls me and says, "Hey Mo, we're going to change your Sunday to a Tuesday." And I'm like, "What? Nope, nope, nope. I've been doing this I was teaching Sundays 5:30 to 6:30 for about 26 years.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like at the same gym. And I was like, no, 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 no. You can't do that. She's like, oh, the numbers on Sundays aren't good. And come on, you could do this. It's a great group. So I finally take it. And I was like, literally, it was hilarious. I was like nervous. And because you also get the same people. Then I moved to a new house and the drive, even though it's not that far during rush hour, it took me like 50 minutes to get there to
Mm.
teach one
Oh,
class. So I
yeah.
told my boss and she's like, "Oh, the State Street gym is just 2 miles from your new house." She's like, "We'll switch you there." And I'm like, yeah. So now I'm at a new gym and a new day. So it's like, whoo, look at me. Look at me. Without a
Mm.
visual, I even did that.
Well, and you without a visual, you also make time for some decorating because you have the cutest home office I think we've seen.
Oh, I love it. Yes, yes. I just finished my office
Oh,
Love
it's
it.
and
so
The
yep,
pretty.
pink and the wallpaper.
yes. And I still like my skulls though. There's still skulls up there. I just put them in gold and pink to make them look
So,
cuter. So yeah,
Oh,
and
I do like to do some DIY, the sliding barn door behind. I made that.
uh-huh.
wow.
So I do, yeah, I like to get really handy with yeah, and I do make time with that. I do have one bathroom left to conquer. So when it gets really bad, meaning I go, I'm so stressed, then I'm like, all right, where's that next room that I needed to
Yeah.
build
Hmm.
When you
something or make something or paint or yeah.
when you
Hmm.
run out of IEPs Friday night.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, right.
Mo, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been so fun to talk to
Mhm.
you. We've picked up excellent little tidbits and we loved your stories and you're just such a pleasure to chat
Thank
with.
you.
Yes, and it's been fun to think about how you systematically kind of go through things. I can tell you're really intentional. As much as you're come off as fun and kind of light in what you're trying to say, I know that there's so much research and intention and the law and the families and you understand the teacher's perspective since that's where you come from. So you're like you bring kind of a light personality to a complex table for sure. But I think that today, just listening to you, it's like, but the bottom line is that you're going in making yourself relatable.
Mm.
So you know all your stuff and it's relatable and you're not there to make friends. So when someone says, well, they're not ready, you're like, nope, I got to call you on that. That's a myth and we're not doing it. Like the other thing is being brave enough to just be honest. If a team, if or members of the team aren't being honest, or don't know the facts, or don't know the law, or don't know it. It's like somebody's got to come in here and speak truth, even if it's not what people want to hear, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also love the approach of saying, because you've seen so many kids, you get in there and you're like, oh, I know I have a success story that's very similar
Yeah.
to this boy. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I know that till I see this boy, but then I go, oh, that's my Nikki. Oh, that's my
Right.
Johnny. Oh, that's my Sahara,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yep.
other person. So, it's like you, as one thing that experience gives you is so many more kids that you can relate to, right?
Yep.
And so it's
Yep.
like, and then you get in like, well, I don't know, but it worked for Susie. And then people are like, well, I mean, I can't deny it worked for Susie. I don't know Susie, and you do, and you saying it worked, right? So it's like the other
Right.
thing is that when we keep it around kids, and then you can tell success stories around those same kids, and
Mm-hmm.
it takes the pressure off of the teacher didn't do this, the parent hasn't done that, the attendance is this, the seating and positioning's never gotten get whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All the reasons why it hasn't been successful are still there. I mean, we're
Yeah.
not changing things overnight. So it's like, how can we get people to, with renewed hope, renewed creativity,
Yep.
with an idea, like, even I love what you said, just like, how can we do more or better? Is that what you said? More different.
More different. And then you added the word better. So we love that. Doing more different, better.
Oh, I added that. Okay. But yeah, it's like, it's like, even if that's what teams leave with, that's planting a seed, right? And then they do
Mm-hmm.
more and the seed grows, and they do different and the seed grows. And next thing you know, they are better,
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So thank you for sharing your
Yay.
expertise. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
your point of view. It's super helpful for those of us who don't have 32 years in it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mo.
Thank you. It's so great.